Look, we're lost, man. That is the same bush we have been seeing for the last 4 days.
I'm sure that's a different bush.
I don't know. It looks the same. So where is this guy then?
I just told you to be out here somewhere. Okay?
Well, he's not. Is he?
Keep looking, keep looking.
I'm too tired to look.
So I heard rumor that there's a NOS moonshiner out here in these woods. I'm gonna go bust him.
Yeah? How many have you busted?
0.
Oh, wow. So how long have you been doing this?
18 years.
I'm tired. These are NOS. Oh.
Hey, you guys looking for some good NOS?
I don't know. He looks kind of shady, you know, with the hair and the beard.
Hey, try this.
I feel so alive! I feel I have so much energy now. Like, I'm awake. I'm awake.
Real NOS.
That is good stuff. I want some more. It worked for him. I know, this stuff is amazing. It's awesome. I can't believe we found some NOS.
You boys have been violating the law. Now the law is gonna violate you.
Alright, here, try this.
This stuff is great! I'm a libertarian now!
Another satisfied customer.
Wait a second. Wait. The beard, the hair, the hat. Dad?
Son?
Hey everyone, welcome to my tube. My name's Steve,
I'm Chris.
and today we have cultural appropriation. Yeah, this should be a fun one. This should be kind of like almost kind of silly.
Shoot from the hip.
Yeah, we're not really, no research, no specialness. So, alright, so.
First off, I need to talk about medieval gesture appropriation.
Isn't that what you're doing?
I come from a long line of medieval gestures.
Oh,
It's okay when we do it. Don't use the J word around me, though.
yeah. See, and I should apologize for my blues band appropriation. I am not in a blues band, nor have I ever been.
Are you a private detective?
No.
Oh,
I should be, though, shouldn't I? Like Jessica Jones?
a blues playing private detective.
You wouldn't have to have... If you were a blues playing private detective, you wouldn't have to have somebody else play the saxophone for you. You could play it for yourself.
Yeah, well, for your own voiceover.
Yeah. Wow. What is cultural appropriation? We've kind of made a joke about it a little bit already, but what is cultural appropriation? I'm thinking it's when you appropriate a culture.
Hey,
Hey, done. Episode's over. Roll credits.
nailed it. But seriously, though, it's the term for when members of, I guess you would say, a dominant culture start adopting habits of a more peripheral culture or subculture.
Yeah, that's probably the best explanation for it, I would think. But my question though is if someone who isn't normally part of a certain culture and starts doing something of that culture, is it inherently wrong?
See, this idea that someone can like own a culture, I think, is what muddies the waters here.
Yeah.
No, I don't think it's wrong, especially if you. What isn't imitation the sincerest form of flattery? I mean,
I would think so. I think that's actually one of the main things about cultural appropriation is is the fact that when you do something for another culture, sorry, I couldn't think of the word, you're almost paying homage to it a little bit. You know what I mean? And that to me is perfectly fine. If there's any cons to it, I think those cons would be like if you're doing it in a mean way,
or just harping on a certain stereotype over
right.
and over and over.
Exactly. And that's the problem with cultural appropriation and stereotypes and stuff like that is like say like take blackface for one of the worst examples of that ever. In the early 1900s, vaudeville plays would white men would paint their face black and then act silly and stupid and stuff to make fun of African Americans. And I don't know, to me that's not cultural appropriation because you're not really appropriating the culture.
Yeah.
That's just making fun of another race and their stereotypes. So there's two differences to me.
Yeah, not even the same category.
Yeah. And you see a lot of times when these people get upset about cultural appropriation, it's more you're making fun of a stereotype than you're actually appropriating a culture. Or you're not appropriating that culture, you're not making fun of someone, you're just actually being a part of the culture. Like somebody wearing dreads is another big one. Just because one culture started it, wherever it came from, or another culture has used it the most, which is actually what's going on with the dreads, and then someone wears it that's not part of that culture, it doesn't mean that they're insulting, they just might like doing it.
Yeah, and if you're a member of the majority culture, it's easy to forget that your culture is made up of all kinds of appropriation over the course of thousands of years.
Thousands and thousands of years, yes. And that's one of the big main example of that is Japan. Japan doesn't have its own culture. Everything that you associate with Japan, they've taken from China, Korea, some of the other nations in that area, and appropriated it and made it their own. And that's not a bad thing. That's actually something they're kind of proud of. That's kind of like the Japanese way is they take, like baseball, they're really into baseball. They took our culture, American culture, and turned it into their culture, and that's fine. That's cool. It means baseball is a bigger thing than it was.
Yeah, I don't understand really the impulse behind getting insulted or angry about it. It's like, you took this from us. No one took it from you. You're free to continue doing it. Yeah, to say it's ruined because someone not in your ethnicity started doing it, that's remotely racist.
Yeah, that's extremely racist actually. And I think if like me being Irish, people tend to celebrate St. Patrick's Day. And we actually have a saying that, hey, everybody's Irish on St. Patrick's Day. And we're fine with that. Because we like the fact that you're involved in our culture, although our culture is not drinking and getting wasted. Breathe. It's okay. I'm fine. But that's just another example, because like on St. Patrick's Day, a lot of people eat like, cabbage.
And you want to talk about somebody who might have got a little bit screwed on the cultural stereotypes. Let's talk about Italians.
Right. That is true. And I think that to me is the difference between cultural appropriation and stereotypes. And I don't know how this became like a stereotype thing, but I feel like that kind of, those two go together is you have a culture and that's fine, and other people follow that culture, do that stuff with that culture, but the minute they make fun of it, that's where there's a problem. And that's where we need the social justice warriors to have an issue, not with, hey, you're wearing a burqa, but you're not Muslim. Like, what if they just like the way it looks?
Yeah. And, even with a little bit of light ribbing is much better than, like, outright hatred. I mean, I'd much rather someone be like, spaghetti, than you murderous gangsters, you know?
Well, then you have someone like my favorite culture that's not my own is the Indian culture from India. I think their culture is just amazing. They have like 1,000 gods that they worship. You know, you could just choose your god. You're like, that one's cool. And just they have like 8,000 holidays throughout the year. I mean, it's such a great culture. And I think one of the funnier things that happened was when the Prime Minister of Canada went to India and dressed up and in Indian fashion garb and stuff and just was dancing along. But I don't think he did it maliciously.
No.
I think he was trying to show them, like, hey, your culture's cool. I'm enjoying it. He's just an idiot.
It's just, Trudeau always trying too hard.
Yeah.
He's like the only one in traditional garb is what made it embarrassing.
Yeah. If everybody else was dressed like that, it probably would have been alright. But see, that's the thing with what we're trying to say with cultural appropriation. There's really not cultural appropriation in the way that the social justice warriors like to paint it.
Okay, let's talk about... Let me try that again.
Yep.
I was not in position. And let's talk about maybe things that started kind of off in a exploitative, insulting way, but might have kind of worked out for the better. In the 70s, the Blaxploitation Films. Yes, it relied on a lot of stereotypes, some of them of which were not good. But it was sort of a first step in getting widespread acceptance of certain aspects of black culture, and it was putting black people in starring roles. I mean,
that's true. I never thought of it that way. Yeah, and if you think about it,
was a step along the way, even if it was kind of an embarrassingly stumbly step along the way.
And if you think about it, like as a minority culture, right? Wouldn't they want more people to be involved in their culture so that way, like, it seems more normal. I use the word normal to people that aren't in that culture. If they're using the culture and doing stuff that kind of has to deal with that, it normalizes it. It makes it okay. So if you're watching a movie, Blaxploitation or whatever, and you're like, oh, I can identify with that black hero there, like what he's doing is noble. And then all of a sudden you're like, hey, maybe that black guy over there is not much different. See, so you now are identifying because you've used that culture.
Yeah, and a few great names did come out of that anyway. I mean, Pam Grier's awesome.
Oh yeah, that's for sure. So yeah, I think with cultural appropriation that we were trying to show that it's not that big a deal, and that if you're not being insulting with what you're doing, then you're probably doing it right, and it's quite okay.
Yeah, I mean, because that's how both sides of a culture improve, is by seeing what the other guy's doing that might actually make a little more sense than what they're doing. Yeah. And no one gets harmed by saying, oh, that's kind of cool, I think I'll start doing that.
Yeah. All right, everyone. Well, that's been our episode. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, hit the like button down there. Hit the subscribe button also. And there's a little notification button now that YouTube's added in the last few months. If you hit that, every time there's an episode, it'll pop up. If you don't do that, we'll probably get buried in your feed somewhere because we're not real good with putting them out on time.
Wouldn't you like to wake up to us?
I would.
I mean, like, not actually in your room.
That'd be weird.
That'd
be awkward.
I mean, you'd hear me coming, though.
Yeah.
You can also find the Maradio podcast on Vivi Media. Come check out if you want a little larger dose of audio, too.
All right, everyone. Have a nice night.
See ya.
Am I wearing it right?
Yep.
You look good. You look like an Irish or Italian-Irish gangster. So how do you want to pose? Look, a couple different ones?
There it is. Do you want to, like, do one looking at each other?
How about like this? Like.